Alright, so as the old character buffs for Honkai Star Rail have been getting closer, I've started to think about once we get this first batch in 3.4, what other characters would I like to see buffed? So today, I want to go over the top 5 characters that I think could benefit a ton from getting buffed in Honkai Star Rail. And these are just my opinion. I'm sure there's plenty of other characters that people are looking for to be buffed. So if you have any characters that I don't mention in this video, definitely leave it in the comments down below. I'd definitely be interested in seeing that. And for my list here, I decided not to include 4 stars. And if you guys want to see me talk about like 4-star potential buffs as well at some point, just as like a little bit more of like a theory crafting kind of thing, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And I'm also obviously not including the characters that are already confirmed to get buffs in 3.4, being Silverwolf, Blade, Kafka, and Jingliu. So those characters won't be there. And now let's just get right into my list here. And I'm also going to give a little bit of my like theory crafting of what kind of buffs I think they could get, not only to make the characters perform better, but also I think to make them a little more interesting, because I feel like having more like interesting parts of kits in Honkai Star Rail is something I think we need, and something that a character like Casterus, with her the way she plays, is like a nice breath of fresh air. So let's jump right into it here. At number 5, I have Seele. Now right now, with the way she is single target, which is pretty bad in the current state of the endgame, where a lot of fights are blast and AoE favored. And right now with Seele, there are still people that can get Seele clears. So it's not that she's like very like unrunnable, but if you are like a lower investment kind of player, like E0, S1, E0, S0, that kind of stuff, you're probably going to struggle a lot with Seele, and she ends up not feeling like she's worth running over other characters, because you're able to get a lot more damage from other characters who are also more favored to the blast and AoE content. But I think that with Seele's buffs, they could make the floor for her having the potential to clear endgame a lot lower for players, so that if you do have the higher amounts of investment, your clears are going to get faster. And if you don't have as much investment, maybe she can become a viable option for you if you need a quantum DPS somewhere. So I think for buffs, I feel like outside of just general damage multiplier increases, I feel like the one cool thing I could see from Seele is to activate the extra turn she gets from her talents effect, also when she uses her ultimate. Now right now, the ultimate activates part of her talent, which is the buff state, which does increase her damage a pretty good amount. She can put up some pretty solid numbers with the buff state. But I also think that giving her an extra turn on her ultimate would also be nice, because not only are you going to have the increased damage of the buff state, but you're also going to be able to have an extra action. And an extra action just means more actions in a short amount of time, so you're getting more damage out overall, which I think could definitely help her. Regardless of what level of investment you have, I think having more times for Seele to attack is really good. And I think that's just going to be a cool thing to have for her. Obviously, you still need a team of supports to maximize her damage and whatnot, which I mean is going to be the case for really any DPS. But I do think that giving her more ways to act outside of just the talent and outside of having an action advance support, I think could help her out a lot. Then for number 4, I have Argenti. Now Argenti is a character that was never really amazing, but also not really completely mid. He has always had his place in pure fiction, but now I think a lot of the time he has kind of been relegated to a sub DPS option with a character like the Herta, for example, who is just a much better erudition DPS. Argenti is a character that I definitely think could be pretty interesting with the way that his kit works, because he does feel like a main damage dealer type, but he just doesn't have the damage to sustain that, especially in the current state of Honkai Star Rail. So I think in terms of buffs for him, I think that the stacks he gets on his talent that currently just give him crit rate, I think that also adding crit damage with every stack would also be really good for him, because you're going to be able to increase his damage that way. Plus, I think just generally increasing his damage multipliers and possibly giving him a little bit more energy. He doesn't need a lot because he has a pretty good energy gain, but because you for a lot of like non-AoE aspects, you want to get his 180 energy ultimate, you are going to want to have as much energy as you can. So I think maybe giving him a little bit more energy in his kit as well, or ways for him to get energy, could be good. But outside of that and just general damage increases, I think Argenti's kit is meant to be very simple and straightforward. So I don't think adding anything super crazy to him is really that necessary. Next up at number 3, we have Well. Now, Well is a very weird scenario because he is a very unique character since he is focused on slowing enemies, but I don't think it's enough to make him stand out in modern content. And seeing as he's kind of like a nihility kind of sub DPS character, I think that his kit should really go more towards that. So when it comes to buffs, I think that they can allow him to inflict some kind of vulnerability debuff, a smaller one, not something that's as crazy as like Jiao Cho, but I think adding a vulnerability debuff to him could be pretty solid, and it could be one that activates whenever he slows an enemy or when he lowers their speed, which are two different effects. I think he could get like 10% when an enemy is slowed, and also 10% when their speed is lowered, and having some kind of turn restriction on it as well. Then I also think for his Ascension 6 trace, to not only just give a 20% damage bonus on when enemies are weakness broken, but also giving him some kind of damage bonus per debuff on enemies could also be really good, which also falls in line with the Good Night Sleep Well light cone. So that would mean some pretty solid damage for him if you're running him as a sub DPS, which I think with that plus the extra debuffs and the vulnerability could make him a pretty solid, secondary option for an Acheron team if you're not wanting to run Jiao Cho and you have like easier Acheron. So making Welt more into like a nihility centric sub DPS, I think could be really interesting for his kit to make him more valuable in modern content, while also just making him a better character that can fit onto teams that are relevant right now. Now at number 2, we have Bailu, who is honestly a character that I defended early on in the game, but Bailu just has a few flaws in her kit, right? Her healing overall is very good, but in terms of what she can offer for the team, she doesn't hold up to more modern abundance characters. She doesn't have a cleanse on her kit, there's no extra utility on there besides her revive, and her skills, RNG healing, can be a little awkward if you need to use it. Now, when it comes to buffs for Bailu, I think 100% she needs a cleanse somewhere on her kit. It can be on the main target of the skill, it could be on her ultimate, it could be maybe like a percent chance depending on which of the skill heals hits you, like 100% on the first one and maybe like a lower percent on the other two. Just some way to cleanse debuffs on her kit. That needs to be added 100% if she gets buffed, because that's the one thing that she's missing that no other abundance character is missing on their kit. It's a very weird thing for her to not to have it, and I think that it would be really helpful. I also think that her invigoration state, which I think is pretty solid, could offer not only a bit of extra healing, but maybe slightly increase the damage reduction effect on it, maybe up it to like 15% since it's currently at 10, to just give you a bit of extra value there, because damage reduction is something that I feel like we don't see that much in Honkai Star Rail, so making that a kind of niche for her is also pretty good. And I also think adding some type of extra utility to her ultimate could also help her out, whether it be giving like a smaller amount of team-wide energy since her healing is so good, maybe a small like damage buff or res pen on there, nothing like super crazy since she is a standard character, but something to make her stand out as well and give her a little bit of extra value could be really good for her kit. And I think if she gets all these things, she would actually be a pretty decent option. Now, I think there's still going to be characters that are better than her, but giving her a bit more in her kit, and especially that cleanse, is going to make her at least viable to use in endgame content. And then for my final pick here at number 1, we have Yanqing. Now, Yanqing is really the only character I feel like that just has like a fatal flaw in their kit, because whenever Yanqing uses his skill, he gets the Soul Steel Sync effect, and with this he gets 20% crit rate and 30% crit damage, which is really good because you don't need to build as much crit rate and crit damage for him to hit solid numbers. But if he gets hit, then you completely lose this until the next use of your skill, so that skill will hit for absolutely nothing, right? Now, there are ways to mitigate this, like with shields, but I feel like it's not worth the trouble to build around Yanqing and try to protect him over using other DPSs that don't need to avoid being hit to work at their full potential. And not only that, Yanqing is also single target, which does kind of suck, but he can still put up at least somewhat decent numbers if you do, heavily invest in him, which I guess it is easier to heavily invest in a standard 5-star than it is for a limited, since you will get them over time. So I think when it comes to buffs for Yanqing, I think that the Soul Steel Sync effect should become a more consistent type of buff. They should just take out this whole if you get hit you lose all the effects thing, I feel like they should make it more consistent to where if they want to keep a way to lose it, like sure, like maybe if he falls below a certain amount of HP, he can lose it. Like if he falls below like 30% HP, but it shouldn't be any time he gets hit. I feel like you shouldn't have that much of a, you know, limiter on him, and making an HP percentage threshold as opposed to just being hit, that allows you to run him with abundance characters rather than preservation, which is probably going to open up a lot more buffs when you run him with characters like Huo. You can run him with Lingsha as well for her utility, and just open up more team options for Yang. I also think just like a general damage increase as well could help him, especially since he is single target. I do think any of the single target characters, if they get buffed, they should have damage increases to make it reasonable to use them in more modern content, because we have a lot more blast and AoE focused content, and in those modes single target characters do struggle a lot because there's just so many enemies to deal with. So those are my picks there for the top 5 characters I think need to be buffed the most. Again, like I said earlier, there are a lot of characters that I think could also benefit from buffs that I didn't list here. So if you have ones that you're really looking forward to them possibly getting a buff in the future, let me know in the comments down below. But with that, everyone, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit the subscribe button. But with that, I will see you all next time.